once you knew what your freedom number was, right? Like the rest of it became a lot easier to assess whether or not it was worth doing or not, or how you wanted to do it, right? Like that's the thing that I really hope people understand in all of this is that fundamentally, there's someone could have done a completely different journey as you, and that would have been okay. But knowing that information up front allowed you to then make the right step and journey for yourself.
Welcome back to the Seven Figure Leap podcast. And that's going to be the key driving question today. I have an awesome guest, Nolan Bradbury, as a friend. He's a member of our Seven Figure Leap Mastermind. He's an alumni of our accelerator program. He's also someone that I turn to for financial help. And so we're going to talk today about money and cash flow, but not like by the numbers as you might expect so much from a CPA like Nolan. We're going to go, I think, much deeper and much more meaningfully into like, what are you really working for? So Nolan, I'm really grateful that you're here. I know we're going to have a really fruitful conversation, maybe unpack some of my own baggage, my own numbers, and some of the things that we're striving for here in our household. So yeah, man, welcome. Thank you for being here. And please take a few minutes, introduce yourself.
Yeah, first off, pleasure to be here. Really excited to do this with you. So as you said, I'm a CPA by trade, although my hope is after talking today that you think of me as the least stereotypical CPA that you've ever met. I went to college, truthfully, to be a psychologist. And so a lot of what I approach accounting from is with that as sort of a backdrop. And I really try to lean into not ignoring, but acknowledging the fact that money, which a lot of what we're going to talk about today is about, has this very strong emotional component to it. And if we ignore that, we're ignoring part of the things that we need to work on and solve. So my hope is through all this conversation that we can provide some real value to the people listening.
I love it. Yeah. And when I met Nolan, I saw LinkedIn, CPA, we talked about marketing and podcasting. And I immediately went to that stereotype. And, as an engineer, I should know better, right? Like, I think I'm the least stereotypical person with an engineering degree too.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why we're such kindred spirits. So,
That's right.
yeah, man, like I would love to know, maybe as the opening salvo here, just sort of your philosophy on like how we should be thinking about. So everyone listening is an entrepreneur. We, have businesses, we have bookkeepers, we have to file taxes, we
Yep.
set goals, and everything's about revenue and all that stuff. Yet I don't know that we're really asking the right questions often when we're setting those goals or picking the bookkeeper or getting a CFO's advice and those sort of things. So I'd love to just let you set some context here about why you do this and sort of like the big picture. Then we can talk more about what you actually do. And then maybe you can kind of coach me through some of the things that you do for other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to date myself a little bit. So I've been in the field for about 25 years, and over the last almost 15, I've been focusing on the small business owner, and I really love working with them because I feel like it's an area where I can actually help people improve their lives, and that's truthfully what is the most important. Um, and in during that last 15 years, what I came to better understand is that they're business owners, and regardless of where they're at, they tend to sort of shake out and generally into like one of two categories. So you have a business owner in the small area where they're growing their business and they're trying to get to a place of feeling like they're successful, right? They're in that growth phase. Maybe they're at a 500,000 revenue and they're trying to get to 1 million, or whatever their stretch is. And then you have another business owner who on paper is successful, and I'm going to emphasize the on paper and come back to that. For whatever reason, that success has not transcended past the business itself, meaning they don't feel it personally in their lives. And what I would say is those feel like, on the surface, two very different problems, but they are ultimately the result of the same problem, just coming at it from different directions. And that's the idea that at the end of the day, both of those business owners struggle with the idea of really having strategically anchored goals that align to what they want their life to look like, right? And that very few people set out to start a business with the intention of like scaling it to like 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, selling it and exiting, right? Like that's great.
Right.
I'm guessing that the people we're talking with about today, right? That's not their objective.
Yeah.
It's an objective of like, they want to live a life that allows them to be more in tune with who they are, a more authentic them. And that they felt that by going out on their own or creating the business they have, that they would be able to do that. And the word I'm going to use that I think that most people are chasing is freedom.
Yes.
Freedom to do what you want, freedom to spend the money you want, freedom to use the time for what you want to do. Whatever freedom is to you, that's the objective you're trying to accomplish. And so, with that as the backdrop, the challenge fundamentally is that a lot of people don't ever stop to think about what freedom really is to them. And without that intentionality, all of the strategic decisions you're making are never going to assure you or guarantee you that you will get that life you want. And that truthfully pains me on a humanistic level. Like, I don't want that for people. I don't want people to slave away in a job or create a job for themselves that they don't truly love, only to not get the outcome that they really want. The goal for most people is not to make $1 million, even though that's what they'll say. The
Yep.
goal is to have $1 million so they can do something else with their life that they want to do,
Right.
right? Like to be able to take an afternoon off and go hang out with their kids, or to take a week off and participate in a school field trip, or whatever the case may be. It's about making sure that what it is you're trying to accomplish, you really understand why you want to do it and what is it that you have to do to make that happen.
I love that. Yeah, we had Ryan Levesque on a recent episode, and one of the key questions that he repeated in different contexts was, "What are you optimizing for?" Right? And we were talking more about business models and home life and things like that. And I think that's also here. It's like, hey, you say you want freedom, and I think this is the classic entrepreneur trap, right? Like, I want to leave my 9 to 5, screw the man. I'm going to go start my own thing so I can finally be free. I don't need to like clock in, clock out, account for timesheets and vacation days. And then you end up working, 80 hours a week instead of 40. And you're like, and then you just constantly get into this mode of like, well, I got to grow because you got to grow, right? And so I got to continue to expand and grow and do more. And we very quickly, and I speak from personal experience, lose sight of why you did it in the first place. You've kind of quit pointing all this effort at some outcome. Like, you just kind of forget there's an outcome, and you just get trapped in the day to day of this existence. And now it's a business instead of a 9 to 5. So I feel that, I appreciate that. And yeah, I'd love to kind of unpack your framework around this, and maybe we can just use me as a guinea pig. I'm a willing to then if you want to get raw and talk about my own
Yeah.
aspirations and numbers and all that stuff. So Nolan, if you'd like, feel free to. If you and I were meeting for the first time, and I'm like, I think I need some help. I got this growing business; it's
Yeah.
scaling. I got some tough decisions to make, and I'm looking at you as a CPA and someone who owns a successful bookkeeping company and does fractional CFO work. And I sit down at your desk and I'm like, help me with my numbers. I have a feeling you might first ask me some different questions. So yeah, I'd love to kind of go
Yeah.
through the exercise here and let people eavesdrop if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what you're going to hear as a theme throughout what we're going to talk about today is I strongly believe in the concept of simple, meaning that I
Mm,
don't want to overcomplicate things where they don't need to be more complicated than they are.
yes.
Complexity just creates friction. Friction creates the ability to not do what you want to do or need to do, right? So, with that as a framework, or with that as sort of the backdrop, the first question I would want to understand is, why are you in business and what are you trying to do with that business? And so there's no real wrong answer to that, right?
Yeah.
It's about, why did you start on out on this journey? That's the starting point. And then the more pressing question is like, what does it mean to you now? And so for a lot of people, they will give different answers to that, even though fundamentally it is the same question. And that informs a lot about how much they have not deviated, because I think that implies that they're in the
Mhm.
wrong place, but how much they are have like moved on from why they started this to where they're at now.
Yeah.
So you can answer that if you want. You don't have to. We can sort of take it through that, but that's where we would want to start.
I'd love to answer it. I feel like it goes through some phases, and I'll go quickly so we're not spending this whole time psychoanalyzing my life. But grew up very poor, had no idea what an entrepreneur was. I didn't ever meet a business owner other than probably shopping in their shops or something, right? And so when I left high school and went to college, being an engineer was like super high identity status. Like, wow, that would be amazing. I got a scholarship. I got to go do that. And so I practiced engineering for 17 years, and partway through that, I decided I need to have an online business. And this starts to get into this question of why would you do that? Right. And so for 8 years, I both had a 50-hour plus job a week, plus growing different online businesses on the side of that, plus, having 3 kids and a wife I actually like, all those sort of things. So phase one was like, why did I do that? And at the time, I think it was a creative outlet. I wanted the idea of like, what if I could, I'm kind of capped at a dollars per hour environment, in engineering. It was a good hourly rate, but it was still capped. And I felt like, wow, like what if I had my own thing? And then that became, wow, I really like digital marketing. I want to do more of that. And now like this engineering stuff kind of feels like it's taking all my time. So eventually, the next phase is I left engineering, went full time into marketing consulting, formed a business partnership with Fire Creek Snacks. And I just sort of like went through I'd say let's call it a 6 year period of just trying on different businesses. And I think the thing I was seeking was basically more dollars per hour. It was like, hey, like I feel like I own a job again. All right, oh, now let me try this thing. Maybe a partnership we could exit. Maybe that'd be the ticket to freedom. And it really wasn't. And then I at some point stumbled into what became Seven Figure Leap. And for the first time, I started to feel fulfilled in doing the work. Like it wasn't like I want to do this work to make more money just to have more money. It was like I do want more money, but I also like really like the work. And I started to actually find the people I like to be around and the format and the people I like to serve. So I'd say for the past 3 years, Nolan, I'm doing work I actually really enjoy. I don't ever like dread getting on a call. I love showing up and being with the people I get to serve. But it starts to ask different questions. Like, at first we made $50,000 doing this the first year, and then it was 500,000 in gross revenue. And then last year was right at 1 million, and this year, we're on track to grow a little bit more from that. And so I've started to ask some of these similar questions of now what's it for, right? So I'll kind of pause there, but just to give everyone a little background and context, it's not like I came out of the womb as a successful business owner. It's like this is kind of new for me. Like the past couple of years, I finally feel like I've figured it out to an extent. It's been pretty successful. It's growing quickly, which comes up with new questions and new pressures.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all that. And so I'm not going to simplify you down to like one sentence that feels
Yeah, yeah.
disingenuous. But what I will say is that the things that you described and what I take away from that would be at every stage before you got to where you're at now, there was a misalignment of what you were doing and what you really wanted to do. Maybe you weren't aware of that in that moment, right? Like even as an engineer, I suspect like you weren't going like, I hate doing this, but there was something that was not allowing you to be all in on it. Right.
Yeah.
And so the way you describe what you're doing now, you started by saying, I love what I'm doing. Every other thing you talked about up to that point was about what you were making. And
Hmm.
that isn't a really important distinction that I think is worth knowing is that this is my opinion. But when you, it's not as cliche to say when you love what you're doing, like you never have to work a day in your life. But there is an idea that like when you find the thing, your purpose or the thing you love doing, that success will follow it. It comes with it, right? Like seeking the money to start with is often a harder path to go down because you end up doing things that are not always the things you love to do,
Yep.
right? And so not to go down too much that rabbit hole, but what I would say is that with that as the background, what you ended with is really important as well, which is that where we want to be also evolves over time. That where you wanted to be 5 years ago is different than where you want to be now, and where you want to be in a few years from now is different than where you want to be now. And that's all natural and normal, but we also can't ignore it, right? This is not
Yeah.
a set it and forget it type situation. We're human beings, we evolve, our needs, our wants change. You have kids, where they were when you started this is different than where they will be when it ends, and what how tethered you want to be where you're at may change too, right? The ability to travel now that they may not be in the house as much, like all of these things influence or should influence how we design this thing that is a major part of our life, right?
Yeah.
And so understanding that, and I'll sort of make a hard left here just to sort of like think about the next thing, which is anytime we're talking about a path we're trying to go on, like if you think of like Google Maps or any app on your phone that does maps, right? It asks you, maybe you don't realize this, but it asks you two questions when you start, right? It asks you, where are you at and where
Mhm.
you're trying to get to. It can't do anything unless you give it that information, right? And the same is true for your journey as well, which is we need you to understand, not me, but you to understand where you actually are at today and have real clarity on where you want to be. And that to be can change and evolve and probably will, right?
Sure.
And then using the Google Maps analogy a little bit more, once you tell it that, it then asks you follow up questions, but they're completely preference in nature, right? It's, well, what would you like the journey to be like? Do you want to take mass transit? Do you want to walk? Do you want to drive? Do you want to avoid tolls? Like, do you want to take the most environmentally friendly path you can take? Like, all of those are preferences to you. And so, if you and I did this exercise and we both put in the same starting and ending point, right? The journey we take may actually be different, even though we have the same set of parameters that we've given because our preferences are going to.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
that's an important aspect in this as well, right? Which is that we each are going to interpret the data in different ways based upon what we want and what we need. And that's why this is also equally important.
Love that. Yeah, and as you said that, one thing that is very true. This is the first time since at least 2008 that I've only had one profession, or like I always had something in a side hustle, or I had three businesses at once, or I had, I've always had multiple streams of income, quote unquote. But really, it was just multiple ways that I was spending my time and attention, and only really in the past. Only 6 months ago did I fully exit the partnership with Fire Creek Snacks, as an example. So this is the first time ever, as an adult, basically, that I've only been doing one thing. And I think that that's very telling. I hadn't reflected on that until you said it, but I think that's because I am all in, to use the word that you used, on this for good reason. And yeah, and I also agree with you that I have struggled at times of getting clear on both ends of that. Like, where am I really? Like, what is our financial status, or what is our, where are we at in life? Where are we at with our financial picture? And then I think always the harder question, where do we actually want to go? And I think it is a we, because even though this business is totally me, and teammates, but totally me from a standpoint of, in my household, this is my thing. It's still my wife and I, and in another sense, my kids, my wife and I, it's our thing, because it's the primary thing that provides all the things we want to do on the personal side. And I think that's one of the things I love, Nolan, about you in general, and this topic is, you're very quick to not segregate those things. It's like the business is your life, right? And your life is the business, because it's such, you even said it's such a large part of your day-to-day existence, and where you spend your time and your attention and your brain with. Um, yeah. So anyway, I guess just all affirmation of what you said, and where should we go from here? I mean, do we want to actually talk about like where we're trying to go, or do we want to,
Well, so I think I'll take you to the next step. And so, because I think what we've explained is sufficient to get us to where
yes,
the next piece we want to be to, which is, you said something, which is the question of like, well, where are we really right now? Okay. And where do we really want to get to? So there are many ways to answer this question, but the way I approach it for people is, I start by asking them to tell me how they spend their money, or in essence, like, describe your lifestyle to me. Okay. Now, this is really important because for a lot of people, understandably, going back to that emotion and money component, right? That is a very vulnerable thing that they have to be doing to me as someone they probably just met, right? I fully appreciate that. And what I
yeah,
always tell people is, I do not care how you spend your money. I genuinely do not. It does not go into a database. I don't statistically track it. I don't sit there and go, oh, that's an interesting use of money. Like, it does not matter to me. It only matters to me that you know how you spend your money. And there is absolutely no judgment, because once you understand what your lifestyle looks like in terms of money going in, money going out, you can start to paint a better picture of what your life really is like. And regardless of whether you like your life or not, most people aspire to have their life be better, whatever better is to them, right? Whether it's more traveling or less debt or more like entertainment, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, there is usually something, regardless of how much money you have, that you want your life to be different. So we start by having them define that for us. We make sure that they agree that that's what their life spending looks like and how they generate income, both from the business, but maybe outside the business. Maybe you have a spouse that works. Maybe you generate some income from rental or some other place. And we paint this picture that is a very simple financial snapshot of, here's how much you bring in on average each month. Here's what you spend and put away to taxes. Can't ignore taxes, right? You have that
right.
obligation. Here's what's left over to sort of spend on your life. And between that, you spend this amount into savings and this amount into funding your life, right? How you live your life. And here's what's left over. Now, it's probably not surprising that a lot of people, that bottom number is a negative number.
Yeah,
It's more and more common, actually. And that doesn't mean that they're irresponsible with money. It doesn't mean that they're bad at business. It doesn't mean any of those things. But it is often a surprise to people. And that is a very important piece of this. And we often will pause there and go, how does that feel? Is it a surprise? Did you expect that? And whatever they say, we let them sit with that feeling, because it's important to really feel what that feels like. Because the next thing we do is I ask them, okay, here's what you said your lifestyle looks like. If you could do any modification of this with a snap of a finger, how much would you want to spend in each of these categories? right? Like, okay, so you spend 300 a month on travel. You'd like to spend 700 a month on travel, like whatever that is. And really emphasizing that this is not an exercise in how do I cut back relative to make that last number work. It's about how do we design the right point we're trying to get to? Because if I, to use an example, right? If you came to me and you said, Nolan, I want to lose 10 pounds. And I said, great, Dustin, let's cut out your favorite food. And you were like, well, that's not really how I was hoping to get to that goal. And that's important because you probably wouldn't stick with it. It
Yep.
wouldn't be enjoyable. You'd opt out at some point. It would take a tremendous amount of effort and focus to stick with that. And so we don't want to create an environment where everything is working against you. You're going to have days where you're tired. You're going to have days where you're not, you don't feel well, and all of those things will undermine what you need to do if the plan you set out is not fully in alignment with who you are,
Yep.
right? And I'm going to pause just to sort of like emphasize that, which is if the person you're trying to become is truly who you are, it's less effort. And
Mm.
that's a really important component in all of this, right? As you did, you didn't say this exactly, but when we were talking about what you're doing now, it was very clear that what you're doing now is probably the easiest work you've ever done. Not because of like it's not doesn't take effort, but because like it's most in tune with who you are and what you want to do, right? Would you say that's true?
100%. Yeah, I would say when the very first accelerator I ever led, I was sitting in this seat and I had sort of like curated a group. And it was like the first time I was like, this is what they mean by like unique ability. Like I'm kind of in flow state on all these calls and it just feels easy, might be too strong, but it feels kind of like an athlete. They may be exerting effort, they may be trying hard, but it feels like natural, I guess is the right way,
Effortlessly, right?
right? It
Yep.
feels like what they're meant to be doing, and they're able to do it longer and with more intention and more focus. The flow state, because they're in a place that really is in tune with their unique ability. Yeah, so I think that's totally true.
So I'm not gonna. It would be hard in this situation, right, to have
Yeah,
you tell me what your current spend is and what your new spend is,
yeah,
and that it just wouldn't work in this situation. So what I'll say is, once we define what that new lifestyle looks like for you, we then focus on the business, meaning that how do we make that number work given the way your business operates? And what I'll say here is that oddly enough, most people don't ever think of how many options they have in the way they run their business. So
yeah.
the analogy I tell to people is imagine for most decisions you face as a business owner, you envision it as though you're standing in front of this door and your choice is I either open the door and walk through or I don't open the door and I stay here. Okay. But the reality is, if you took a step back, you would see that there's an infinite number of doors stacked next to that door in either direction. And you can go through or not go through any or all of them. And that part of that understanding of that is that there is no right or wrong way. There is just a way to try. You do the next thing, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and that's completely okay. And that when we're designing the business, we have to sort of shed ourselves from the idea that it's a certain way and that it would be too hard to do something,
Mm,
right? Um, to use another analogy, it's like if you were climbing, if you had the base of a mountain, you're like, that's the ledge I want to go to get the best view up there. And then you get there and you're like, well, this is the view that I expected. So you just start climbing higher instead of going, oh, well, maybe if I go down and go to that other mountain, like that will be the ledge I can look from, right?
yes,
We just always assume that the path we're on, we have to stay on and just keep going further and further and further down that path. The
yes,
reality is that's not true. That's how you get into a place of like really kind of being unhappy because to your point you said earlier, you get bigger, you do more things, the business becomes more complex. And if it's not the thing you want, all of those just get amplified and they just become more problematic and more stressful. And you just get further from what you really want to experience.
yeah. I like that. I would say, um, in hindsight, in my own journey, it's like I stuck with engineering. I'd say like 7 years too long because I wasn't yet at like specifically because I
Yeah.
wasn't yet at this peace or this. I didn't yet have the trust, the faith, the courage to know I could make a different choice, and I can always go back. Like everything felt like a permanent decision.
Yeah.
And once I finally made that first decision, since then I've been much more capable of trying new things and trying different paths, right? And I know my journey sounds crazy when people hear it. It's like engineering, a marriage business. I had a golf club flipping business. I had a shin splints business. I had like there's a bunch of them, and then the Fire Creek thing with meat sticks and then podcasting, and like none of it makes sense. But to me, the through line there is every subsequent business choice has gotten faster and faster as I've gotten closer and closer to the thing I should be doing. And
Yeah.
I guess I finally found the freedom to make new choices, I guess. And then in this business, I got a 3-year history in this business. I find that I'm able to optimize more quickly than I was ever able to do 10 years ago in any other business. Right. And so I guess to affirm and share my own experience and the truth that you're saying is, yeah, it's like totally,
Yeah.
it totally is in alignment with my own experience. And I guess too, I'll say this real quick, Nolan, so we can move on to the
Yeah.
framework, because I felt like I started to open up and share with people, and then they're like, "Wait," then they quit talking about Dustin stuff. We're not
Sorry.
getting all the numbers; it's not
Yeah.
actually that relevant. But I can say, you know, when I first started getting clear on, like when I first started having some money, and so when the number was less negative, and then not negative, and then it became positive, then you start to have new choices to make, right? And
Yes.
so for us, the short term choices were pretty easy. It's like we want to pay off all our debt, except we still have a mortgage because it's 2.125%. What? But so we maintain that, but we were able to pay off our debt, and that was amazing. And then we have 3 kids, and 2 of them drive, so we have 4 cars. We've got kids in college that we're cash flowing college, and so that number starts to get used. I was going to say dwindled. That's not a negative thing. Like we have this capital to deploy, and we get to be very conscientious about what we're prioritizing. And for us, that's um, not having cash flow go to debt, and it's being able to free our kids from unneeded debt at this phase of life. But that's just a phase. So then there's stuff beyond the cash flow and the cars for the kids, and all that stuff. And then that starts to open up the next chapter of like, well, if the cash flow continues or even grows, what are the next objectives beyond the 1 to 3 years? Because 1 to 3 years to me has always been a pretty comfortable place to plan. Like that feels tangible, and I could do that. So I guess hopefully that gives people some context of sort of like where this road started with 7 Figure Leap and personal
Yeah.
cash flow, kind of where we're at today in this phase of life with the kids and the different things we're dealing with. And then, yeah, we could talk more about our current best guesses on what we want to do beyond this, the immediate needs of our family.
Yeah. So to use that, and I'll flip it a little bit slightly here, just to sort of fit it into the framework that we're
Yeah.
walking through, which is as you got as more money came in, right? As you said, you sort of have different choices that you had to make. And the challenge in all of that, right, is that like how do you make sure that those choices are staying true to what are the most important things, right? Because those choices will move, right? As you said, like kids going to college versus paying off debt, and then like setting the kids up for like life without debt and so.
Yep.
And so all of that comes back to like at a very simplistic thing, what we want people to walk away with in the early phases of this process is, do you know your freedom number? And what I mean by that is like, do you know the number that you have to generate from your business to live the life you've defined for yourself, right? So the first step is defining what happiness looks like to you financially, meaning
Yep.
what do you need to live this life? The second question is like, what does that mean your business has to do? And there are two pieces to that, which I don't want to ignore one of them because one of them is the one we often ignore. So the first is financially, what does it have to produce? Like profit wise, cash flow wise, like what does that look like? And we help people build out that for themselves. Like we take them through and understand like on a monthly or whatever sort of the most meaningful cycle for them.
Yep.
How does your business flow when money comes in? How does it move through the business till it ultimately gets to you and your family at the bottom of that funnel? Okay, the second piece though is how much friction occurs as it comes through the business. And by friction, what I really mean is how much do you hate doing what you have to do?
Yeah.
Right. So again, like
That's a
a
good
lot,
definition of friction. How much do you hate the things you have to do? Yeah.
because let's be honest, we're all of the people listening to this are in some way or form in the business. We all
Yeah.
want to be on the business, but
Right.
we are still in the business to some extent, right? And
Yeah.
so I'll ask what I want to understand for people is, do you know how much in the business you want to be? For some people, they love doing the work, and their actual ideal state is to be able to do the work in a way they love.
Yep.
That is really important to know. For other people, it's like, I don't want to do any of this work. I want to outsource all of it and just be able to lead the business. Well, those are very different things, and they will you again preferences where you start, where you end in that financial state. If you think of your P&L, how it comes in, how you earn it, how it comes out, different preferences lead to how that money flows through there. And so for each person, they have to really understand again what is the most happy they will be in terms of their role in the business. So once we understand the financial involvement and their personal involvement, we can help them define or reshape or readjust the business in a way that is more in alignment with what they want. So now they're going to get, in an ideal world, what we've created for them, right? And this is the part that often surprises people is they will see this number and they go, okay, you've just defined the life you want to spend and how you want to spend it. Yes? Yes, they say. And then we go, okay, now you've redesigned the business and this is what you're going to generate each month. You agree with that? Yes, we agree with that. Okay. So then this is all you have to do that because we've just agreed that to get these numbers, you're doing these things, right? So maybe for you, Dustin's right. It's a certain number of cohorts per year that you're reporting, right? Or the number of people per cohort. But for a lot of people, they will stop at the level of, oh, I need to make $1 million this year to get that number. It's like, well, yes, but that's not an actionable item that you can focus on as a business owner. There's a lot of different ways that you could do that. But for you, what we help them identify is, how are you going to get to that $1 million number? Or how are you going to get to the 60, $70,000 a month number that you want to have in revenue? And what are the things you're going to focus on, right? So maybe this is a good opportunity for a jump here, Dustin. You can sort of explain to you, for us, to the listeners, how you approach sort of answering those questions as you sort of go through that
Yeah,
analysis and you start to build out what the business wants to look like for you.
great. And full transparency, Nolan's helped me with this very thing, and especially the first part of it, with the monthly cash flow side. So, but I really like that. I really like that you have the both sides here. It's not just the number. The number is really important, right? The freedom number, the monthly cash flow number, the nut, whatever you want to call it, like the amount that you really need and want, the amount that you want, that fills your needs and your wants. And then, because we're talking to business owners, how you tweaking the knobs in the business to where you get that number in a way that optimizes your own freedom and happiness, because there's lots of ways to get to the same number. And so these are, I love the kind of the visual here, that there's different knobs, there's different doors to walk through to get really the same end result depending on your desires. So for me, yeah, we basically set like a monthly, comfortable take home pay, right? It's more than a need. There's like the need of, you got to pay the mortgage and food and all that stuff. And then for us, that would include, one of the things we've done since we've had some more cash flow is bolster security, in the sense of like disability insurance, more life insurance, an umbrella policy. As you have a little more cash flow, you're able to plug the holes a little bit on risk. So some risk mitigation. I know it's really boring, but it's something that no one's helped me with. It's been really important.
Boring
So
can be good when it comes to money, just to be clear, right? Like
yes,
sometimes you don't
absolutely.
need excitement in that realm.
Yes, yes. So we got some boring stuff that we're covering. Like I said, we've got some kids cash flow, or cash flow going towards kids, upcoming college and things like that. And then we do have a pretty healthy travel number, because one of the things as a family we decided a couple of years ago, as we were less constrained on some of the cash flow, is like, hey, we love to travel, and let's set a goal to do a quarterly trip. And so every quarter we do something. Now that could be a weekend in St. Louis, doesn't have to be anything exotic. Last year it was 2 weeks in Italy with my wife. That was pretty exotic. And so depending on what we're doing, we always have a pretty healthy allocation to travel. And we've decided when we travel, we want to do it right. And so like this summer we're going to the beach. We could be 3 miles off the beach and take a shuttle down, but we're going to stay on the beach, and we make different choices around that because we're optimizing for the stuff that we care about. So for us, there's that monthly number, and we got the cash flow to support that. And then basically every quarter, there's hopefully some excess, right? It's like, oh, we got the monthlies coming out, and that supports everything we really want at this stage. But then we have some excess, and so that excess, then we can on a quarterly basis think about what we want to do with that. And so maybe that goes into an investment, maybe that goes into a rental, maybe that goes into just more savings because we feel like we want to have more savings. Maybe it's a gift to a church, or something that we care about. But we make that's sort of the cadence. And at the end of the year, maybe we've kind of beefed up that, and we can make more of an annual decision. So I like to think in terms of regular strategic decisions. I don't want to have to think about it every month. So every month we've got like the monthly flow of things that just kind of happens automated through Nolan's help. Quarterly, we got some more kind of mini decisions to make, and on an annual basis, we may set some new goals and have some projections for the next year. So that's kind of how we've handled the freedom number part of this. And then, as Nolan said, there's lots of ways to get that number or exceed that number for on purpose for a while, right? Or maybe you back off because you're having a health issue, or you want to just spend more time, you're taking a sabbatical. You can also back off the number as long as you plan, because once you know the number, you can make a lot better decisions around the number. So for us, well, I'll take a breath there. Anything I should fill in, and I'll talk more like where we're at with this season of how we're getting to the number.
No, I think that's perfect. I think it's
Okay.
setting the tone for sort of helping people understand like that's where we want to get to, and then helping them understand how do we approach getting like making the decisions that allow that to happen, which I think is
Yes.
what you're going to kind of talk about a little.
Yeah. And so for me in this present moment, I'm looking at um, all the different hats I wear, very in the business, right? And I've got some great contractor help, but I've made some choices, a conscious choice. This is really drive this home for people. Last year, we had a great year. We had like a 70% margin in our business. That sounds great. That's good cash flow. That's great for the family cash flow. It also means it's exhausting because I'm not investing enough back into the business to get more help. So heading into this year, towards the end of last year, I've hired my first full-time employee. And so Tiffany is an executive assistant of mine, and she helps with our client success because community is a big part of what we do in Seven Figure Leap. So that was a big step. First time full time employee. This year, I love sales and marketing, but what I started to realize is totally become the bottleneck to the sales and marketing of the business. So right now, as we record this, I've invested in some people, some help to help me streamline some sales and marketing activities. And so I'm just making these conscious choices sort of one quarter at a time. You kind of hear that theme. For me, that's just, I like to think in 90-day sprints. So every quarter I've got a different priority. Like, what am I taking off my plate this quarter? And I'm taking some of what could be dispersed cash flow to my family, holding it in the business and using that to invest in systems. Like last year it was Circle, then it was hiring an executive assistant, and it was getting a fractional COO for a quarter to help get some project management systems. This year it's sales funnels, and the next role I'll hire will be someone to help me basically do customer enrollment, like a salesperson, because I still take those calls and I want to do less of that. So maybe I can go play golf more or go on another trip. Or realistically, what I'll do is probably spend more time delivering in the program because that's what I love to do. I love the coaching and leading masterminds, having in person events and things like that. So I know that maybe sounds a little random to the listeners, but I think we all kind of like have all these different roles. And I think one thing I've gotten better at is identifying the next most, like I wrote it down, the most painful thing I'm doing. What's the next pain I want to remove as much
Yeah,
as possible and use my resources in terms of energy and money and attention to replace myself in the next best role. And just finish this thought. These are all sort of 1 year and 3 year sort of goalposts for me. So I kind of have a very clear vision in 3 years what role I want to play in Seven Figure Leap, roughly revenue with lower margins, more help. It will also be a more systematized business that would be saleable. I can't even imagine a time when I would sell this, but I'd like that optionality because I think it makes for a better business. And who knows? Maybe God forbid, maybe I get sick or there's some need for me I can't control everything, right? So maybe there's some need that I do want to sell it in 5 years or 10 years, and to have it available as an asset for my family to me is very attractive.
I appreciate all that, and that is like I think there's so much there to take away, and I'm going to risk trying to simplify it down again because there's one theme I want to pull out from all of that, which is if I am tell me if I'm off base on this, but I think a lot of the clarity you've gotten stemmed from knowing what it is that you had to like where you had to get to and like very definitively like
Yeah.
what once you knew what your freedom number was, right, like the rest of it became a lot easier to assess whether or not it was worth doing or not, or how you wanted to do it, right? Like that's the thing that I really hope people understand in all of this is that fundamentally there there's someone could have done a completely different journey as you and that would have been okay, but it'll knowing that information up front allowed you to then make the right step and journey for yourself. And now, and because of that, right, the decisions, you say, they get faster, they get easier because they're all sort of like you start running downhill almost, which is like you get the benefit of like gravity pulling you because fighting against anything, everything is in alignment with what you've designed. Like you now have this business that is somewhat perfectly in alignment with who you are and what your lifestyle wants to be. And as opposed to what a lot of people I think feel like is the business is at odds with them. Like they want to take time off and yet they feel like they can never step away from the business. They want to spend more money in their life, but they don't feel like the business is giving them that money. Like those are the things that we want to eliminate. And what I feel like our framework helps do for people is really help them get clear on those pieces. Like if you think it's a really nerdy example, but if you think of like a Venn diagram, like the two circles
Hmm.
that overlap themselves, like
I love Venn
you have
diagrams, man. So
I knew you would. I knew you would. So, like, if you think of like one circle being your company's like finances and the other being clarity, where they overlap, that's your personal freedom. That is what
yeah.
creates that, right? It's the two of those things in harmony. And when they meet and you get that piece, that is what allows you to get the thing you want. And whatever that thing is, it's personal to you, but it allows you to make the right choices to get that piece.
Yes. Yeah. I love all that. I'm really glad we kind of went down that journey. And in reflecting on that, sitting in this seat today, I feel very blessed and privileged. Of course, there's plenty of challenges. There's still tough decisions to make every day and all those sort of things. But yeah, I mean, Nolan and I really started exploring this together. He was in my program, he's in our mastermind. So we get to spend quite a bit of time together. We were hanging out in Nashville at our retreat last fall. And then just before that, I started working with him on a professional basis with him helping me. And yeah, probably not coincidentally, I would say like that was an inflection point about a year ago where as I had a clear number, like the freedom number, like I know I built, we built all this stuff in, like this is what we want to have on a monthly basis. And then we were looking at what the business was doing. And I know it sounds funny to some folks who maybe aren't on this side of it, but it's like, oh, there's like too much cash flow. Like there's enough here that you could take it all home, but are there things in your business that you'd rather spend that money in to give you more autonomy, freedom, and free you up to make some different decisions? And it was like a year ago that I started making those sort of more strategic decisions in the business. And so if someone's listening and they're like, must be nice, like I'm trying to just get out of the red on a monthly basis. Dude, that was me like 2 years ago. This is all kind of new. And yeah, so maybe the thing you need to focus on is your offer, your sales and marketing, most of the things we usually talk about on this podcast. But the reality is, whether you're in the red, you're way in the black, you are like fully financially independent, you still need to be conscious and optimizing for your version of freedom. And you're still going to be making decisions about what you're going to do with that. And so hopefully, people hearing sort of my before, during, and after, and working with Nolan and through this framework, just to give some context. That's my goal. I don't want people to know my financial, personal accounts, and we didn't get that specific, but I want to provide it just so people can kind of hear a real life, real time example of what's shifted even in the last year, where I'm at right now, what I'm thinking about over the next year. Maybe we'll do a follow up in a year and I'll have totally changed my mind, or circumstances in my life will change, and we'll make different choices. But the fact is, you have choices. And I think that's one of the key things here. So,
Yeah.
Nolan, I want to turn it back to you, let you recap what we want to recap. And then, of course, we want to make sure people know how to start taking some action on their own using the resources that you have.
Yeah, so I'll kind of try to tie these all together as best I can because I think they overlap to a certain extent. Which is, as Dustin said, like once you get clarity on like what it is that you need to do, like like this is the thing, this is why it's the thing, it becomes very personal to you. Then it allows you to make better decisions. And what I would say is, and Dustin alluded to this, is if you picked it up, was after he started getting the information, it became more present in his life in sense of like not that like he was spending hours and weekends like reviewing his like P&L. That's not what I'm suggesting, right? Like that's not how we're spending our time, but like there was an intentionality that came with that. There were better discussions around what the numbers were, what they meant, and then it allowed you then to reflect on what that meant to you and how you could go about strategizing it, right? That's a
Yeah.
really important piece to this, which is the conversation doesn't stop once you get the number because the situation will evolve. Like every
Yeah.
day is a new day in the business and there's a new challenge to face. There's a new thing to think about. And that's really an important piece because then that leads to the last piece, which is it helps you make better decisions both now and in the future because when the future changes, and it inevitably will, right? A year from now, 3 years from now, what you want will evolve. You will already be thinking about how it will evolve because all along the way, you're reassessing where you're at and where you're going. It isn't like and I'll use taxes here as an example. A lot of people, it's a once a year thing. You reach out, you do your work, here's the thing, and then you don't talk to the person for another year. And it's like, well, the experience you had is probably not what you wanted because it wasn't an actual like experience or relationship. It was like you talked to someone once. Like the expectation of what you're going to get out of that is not the same as if you're doing it monthly or quarterly and you're having an intentional conversation around what it is you want, why you're doing it, and what you need to think about before the next time you come back. It creates a whole environment of accountability and focus and clarity that I think is really important. We have it in other aspects of the business, right? Marketing, I think it's a lot of that attention, right? But the accounting finance aspect of it, because it's not what we love and what maybe and so we avoid it, it gets overlooked, but it is a key component in all of this and ensuring you get what you want. So to summarize this, what I'll tell people is, if you've heard this and you listen to this our conversation and you're like, I really like what I heard, or like I there's some things in there I want to reflect on, but I don't really know where to start. Let me give you three things to sort of take away from this and think about, right? So the first is, do you know what your business needs to earn to give you that freedom? That's kind of where I would suggest you start. And if you don't, then we've talked about how you can approach that and sort of get clarity on that. And then second thing is, are your goals anchored in true happiness? Meaning that like the things that you've set up that you use to create the freedom goal, are they actually the things that are going to bring you happiness when you achieve them? Or will they be anchored in sort of like keeping up with the Joneses type stuff? Right. And then the last thing I say is, I'll add is like, are your numbers helping you make better decisions? Meaning that like, are you able to use the information you have to make the decision that will get you on the same path or keep you on the path towards achieving that freedom that you want? And the reality is, just like a lot of stuff, you're capable of doing this on your own. Oftentimes people need and want support because it isn't human, it's not our area of expertise. And so people often benefit from working with us to help guide them on that journey and keep them focused, just like a personal trainer would if you went to the gym, right? You can go lift on your own. You can
Right.
read YouTube videos on how to properly do the weights. But there is something different about having someone there when you show up and giving you real time pointers on, like, oh, your form's a little off. You want to do this, that over the long haul make a huge impact as they compound upon themselves. And you will get to your goals faster in most cases.
Yes. And I would say, from a personal standpoint, having someone, just like a trainer, it's a great example. Having a financial trainer, and one named Nolan is in particular, you know, it, yes, Nolan's very an important part of this. And Nolan asks, great questions. He has amazing frameworks. Like, Nolan is obviously my preferred person for this. So that's who I use. But whether it's Nolan or anyone else, the accountability is a really important part of this. And that's not only to like slap your hand and say, oh, you didn't do what you said. It's more like being prompted once a month, once a quarter, whatever the cadence is, and not just once a year sitting there only focused on taxes, to actually look at your numbers, to make a fresh choice, to, yeah, it could be a 5 minute thing, but to have a conversation about the numbers, you have to think about the numbers. It brings them back into your purview. The other thing what I'm really getting at with this, Nolan, for me personally, a huge benefit of this that we didn't talk about that I want to make sure we sneak in here is, I have a wife of 23 years. I love her. She's not an entrepreneur. She is very much in the camp of, honey, I trust you. Like, whatever you want to do in the business, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that that is great and not good. And, it's also risky. And so one of the things that this has done for me on a very personal basis is, I'll sit in this chair and I'll have Bethany, my wife, sitting right here in a chair, and having Nolan on the other side of Zoom to do our check-ins, to talk about our goals, to say, what do you guys want to be doing in 3 years, in 1 year? And it's no longer, even if she doesn't contribute a lot, she's contributing something. And now we have a united front as a couple on something that's honestly been pretty um, segregated, and like, it's my business and I do the business. This is the chair I sit in all day. And now she's got a voice, and I super appreciate that. She speaks a lot of wisdom into it. And I think there's just a real energy that comes if you're married and having both of you talk about finances, where one of you probably by default doesn't want to very much. And so I think that's reason enough to have a financial coach in your corner and have someone from accountability, is to have that united front with a spouse, if that's the situation you find yourself.
Absolutely appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for having that.
So, Nolan, three questions people should walk away with trying to answer.
Yeah.
What's the freedom number? What's that monthly number you need to accomplish your goals? Two, what are the goals? Or are your goals rooted in something that's actually going to give you happiness and not just a borrowed goal or keeping up with the Joneses and what you see other people doing? And three, do you have the numbers that you need to help you make better decisions? Because ultimately, that's the service of the numbers, right? It's like they should really make you make better decisions for your own life.
Yeah.
So I know you have resources for people. Where should people go next if they want to go deeper on answering these three questions or any of the things that we've touched on today?
Yeah. So if you're interested in sort of like kind of like taking that journey a little bit more and kind of following like what that experience is like, or if you kind of want to relate more about who our clients are and that, you can go to numbersforfreedom.com. It kind of takes you through the client journey, if you will, and kind of things to think about, help you reflect upon that. That's helpful. If you're at a place where like you just have questions and you want a more direct answer, you can go to our website, bradfieldco.com. and there's a contact button on there, and you can send an email to us. Real human being will respond to that, so please don't spam us. And just reach out and just ask your question, and we can set up a time to talk, and we'll talk through sort of what your answers to some of these questions are, and whether we're the right fit or not is not the point of the call. The point of the call is to help put you on the path that is right for you, and maybe that's working with us. Maybe it's working with someone else, or maybe it's just getting an answer to a question that allows you to figure out the next step in your life. Like, I'm less concerned about that piece. I'm more concerned about just making sure that you get something meaningful out of the time together. That's we can do that. That's my hope. That's our main focus is helping business owners get closer to their ideal.
I love it. Yeah, and I do. I get to spend a lot of time with Nolan. It feels like in uh, all aspects of our professional lives, we help each other a lot. I'll say it that way. We spend a lot of
Yes,
time in proximity. Everything he said there is 100% authentic and true. He really just wants the best for people. And so I love this numbers for freedom.com. That's going to take you to sort of the self assessment route. Like you can go like help yourself, and you can also get a hold of some resources and some personal contact there if you need it. And then if you just want to like, hey, Nolan is Dustin's guy. I just want to talk to Nolan. I want to talk to his team. You can go to bradfieldco.com. Is that correct?
yep,
And just fill out a form, book a call, and have a conversation, and see how they might be able to help you directly. So Nolan
yep,
Bradbury, man, you are a gift to me. I really appreciate all the time here,
absolutely.
the ability to gently guide me through some sensitive information, right? Like no one wants to talk about their money and their goals, but I'm grateful to have someone I can trust to do that with, and we'll let other people listen into the conversation this time.